A final from Indianapolis, where for the first time in over 40 years, the Dogs had their day and it was defense that ruled the day. Alabama trying to come back, and it is Keely Ringo with a pick six. Download and subscribe today. 79-yard interception return for a touchdown to seal the deal as the Dogs beat the Tide 33-18, winning their first national championship since 1980. Defeating Alabama for the first time since 2007. As the Dogs win it with defense, Stetson Bennett did enough. Threw up a touchdown to Adonai Mitchell, and Kirby Smart finally beats his former boss. Nick Saban and the Tide go down. Stetson Bennett and the Dogs are national champions. Have a day, Dogs. Have a day, kids. 33-18. Bryce Young got sacked in this game, something that didn't happen in the SEC title game. 35 of 57, 369 yards, a touchdown, 2 picks, the one to end it. Stetson Bennett did enough. 17 of 26, 224 yards, 2 touchdowns. Georgia ran the ball well. Georgia played defense really well. This was the Georgia team you expected to show up in the SEC title game. But they show up in the most important game of the season, and they take down the reigning national champion Crimson Tide to the tune of 33-18. Under hits, and Georgia covers the 2.5. Also, if you took Georgia on the money line, good for you. Couple of props like Joe Musso had Bryce Young over his completions, 23.5. That was never a sweat. Jamison Williams under 116.5 receiving yards. Unfortunately, he got injured in this game, which certainly changed the dynamic of this game. But he goes out, and the props do hit. But the big story here, Georgia wins with defense and wins it 33-18, again, to win their first national championship since 1980. Get some instant analysis. Welcome in two-time Super Bowl champ and CBS Sports HQ college football analyst Chip Patterson, also the host of the Cover 3 podcast. B-Mac, what a game. Like, defensively, we saw big plays. The first half was quiet, but the second half was incredible. Your initial reaction to Georgia winning the national championship?
Outstanding job by Kirby Smart the entire season. They were the most consistent team in college football. The only blemish happened in the SEC championship game. And I heard you mention the defense that we saw tonight was a defense that we thought we would see in Atlanta. But this was the most important time for their defense to show up, especially in the red zone. Just think about all the opportunities Bryce Young and the Alabama Crimson Tide had in the red zone, and they had to settle for field goals. That was the difference in this ball game for me, in my opinion, based on what Georgia's defense did when they buckled down and played some of their best defense in the red area was huge for them. And then eventually in the second half, we saw Stetson Bennett. I love Stetson Bennett's short-term memory. The fumble that gave Alabama an opportunity to get into the end zone. And then the next drive offensively, pass, pass, pass. He was dead on. He was relentless. He played with so much confidence after that turnover. And because of his ability to have short-term memory and just bounce back was huge for him, along with their offense. And don't forget about Zamir White and how he just closed the ball game for Georgia.
You know, we're going to dig into all the X's and O's of this matchup, but sort of 30,000 feet here, Chip, taking a look at this. This is vindication, 14 years in the making. First win for the Dogs over Alabama since 2007. For them to get over that type of hump on this type of stage, what does that mean for that program in this moment and moving forward in an always competitive SEC landscape?
Massive in the historical sense, as you mentioned, decades in the making. But for me, my focus is on Kirby Smart. And my focus is on somebody who came up under Nick Saban as a Nick Saban assistant, who got hired to come to Athens with the keys to what it takes to be able to win national championships. For him to be able to deliver a national championship in a relatively short time frame when compared to his predecessor, I think automatically validates so much of what he's trying to do there at Georgia. To be able to overcome what has been that 0-4 start against Nick Saban in the Georgia-Alabama rivalry since he took the head coaching job, just absolutely massive. And to do it with defense, as BMAC mentioned, getting it done in the red zone, just phenomenal performance all the way around. And it takes something that I love about college football and puts it on display, because Georgia was the best team all throughout the year. They were the most consistent team all throughout the year. They were, heading into the SEC championship game, a number one that we all felt very comfortable positioning way ahead of everybody else. And now to be able to tap into that greatness that they had, the routines that they had all the way back in the preseason, and lean into that in a tough, hard-fought, low-scoring game to be able to come out with a victory. It's one of the things I love about college football. I mean, guys, I loved this game. Mm-hmm. I understand it didn't have a bajillion points. It wasn't 45-40. It wasn't decided in the 30s. But I loved this game, and I don't want college football playoff expansion. I think this game shows us that we've got just what we need it for.
Well, for now, we're not any closer to expansion. The failed proposal on Monday from the Board of Managers. So we'll have to wait and see on expansion. I'm for expansion, but right now in this moment, I don't really care about expansion because I'm happy for Georgia. Look, I'm happy for Stetson Bennett IV, a walk-on. He goes to a community college. Prior to that, in high school, he wears the mailman hat just to get attention at these showcases. He goes from walk-on to national champ. BMAC, you pointed out something really particularly key in terms of when he fumbled, which was an incredible play and maybe a lucky play, you'd argue, by Alabama to be able to recover that with a one toe inside the out-of-bounds line. But the fact that he was able to come back, forget about that, and still help lead them to victory, what's that say about that young man?
It says that, he doesn't lack any confidence. And it also tells me the offensive staff believe in Stetson Bennett. Because remember how rattled he looked in the beginning of the ball game. It seemed like the moment was a little too much for him. He eventually calmed down, but he didn't look like the Stetson Bennett that we've seen throughout the course of the year. And then when that fumble happened, like you said, a crazy play that just landed in the hands of an Alabama defender and gave them the momentum instantly. And then the next drive, all passes, aggressive play calling, like they actually had one of the best quarterbacks in college football on their side, the way they put the football in his hands. And you talked about the mailman hat. You better believe he delivered. I mean, we saw dime after dime, wide receivers creating separations from defensive backs, and he just putting the ball right where he needed to put the ball. When I saw that drive, I was like, okay, yes, Georgia, they're ready. They're ready for this moment. Stetson Bennett was ready for this moment. And if you're Kirby Smart, I mean, a lot of people criticize Kirby Smart for not going to JT Daniels when he was healthy. Kirby understood and knew who was the best man for the job at the quarterback position. And because of that, the mailman delivered a huge chunk of mail tonight.
I mean, you look at that through the lens of what that young man looked like through the first couple of drives of this game. He couldn't write his name on a sheet of paper, let alone lead a team down the field the way he did in the second half. Second half of the season, and specifically the last 3 games of the season, Chip, yes, they do take the loss in the SEC title game. Then they take care of their semifinal matchup, and then here in the national title. Where was Stetson Bennett better over these last couple of months of the season? Where did he change things? Because not too long ago, we were talking about a quarterback controversy, which quarterback gives this team the best chance to win, and not just win, but which team won't lose it for this dynastic-type defense that they had put together. Where was Bennett better over these last couple of weeks?
He got comfortable having to play from behind. He got comfortable having to play against elite competition, and he got comfortable having to play against an offense that you had to respect. I mean, much love to Tennessee and what Josh Heupel did with Hendon Hooker and the Volunteers offense, but you look across Georgia's schedule and you just don't see a lot of offenses that are intimidating, which allowed Georgia to be able to execute a game plan where Stetson Bennett did not have to face the same kind of challenges that he faced in the SEC championship game and that he faced again in the national championship game. Clearly, the Bulldogs took care of Michigan in the line of scrimmage from the beginning. There was no question of which way that game was going to go. But I think think that Stetson Bennett, we saw that a lot of his passing statistics, which were excellent. He was great in terms of passer efficiency, great in terms of yards per attempt, but his yards and his touchdowns, he wasn't very prolific, but it was all coming when Georgia had the lead. That's when he had the most success. That's when he was targeting Bowers. That's when he was able to make good plays down the field. So to all of a sudden now be in this kind of tight game, it's a new experience for him. He first saw it in the SEC Championship game, and now he sees it with a much better response. I said going into the game and again at halftime that the first 3 possessions of the SEC Championship game in the second half was where Georgia lost the SEC Championship game. And what have we seen from the second half performance from Stetson Bennett? The exact opposite of that. He rose to the occasion, and he was able to shake off that mistake and still come back and lead that pivotal touchdown drive. So phenomenal performance from him. He did not have to face the kind of pressure that he's had in the last 3 games in the first games of the season. Now, all of a sudden, with a little bit of experience, he shows up on a big stage in Indianapolis.
We give Stetson Bennett his flowers because he deserves them. He is now a national champion. That cannot be taken away from him, but a big part of that national title was what this Georgia defense did throughout the entire season. Specifically here in the national championship game, Baymack, where did you see differences between this game and the SEC title game? Because Bryce Young was under pressure. Might not have been sacked a whole host of times tonight, but was sacked 0 times in that SEC title game. How did you see them attacking that front line for Alabama differently here in this game? Did they throw different schemes at them? Did you see some stunts? Where were they more effective, the front 7 for Georgia?
Of course, the schemes were a little different. They became a little more exotic. What I mean when I say that, just showing certain coverages on the back end and being able to roll extra defenders in the blitz concept. And most importantly, they played with more energy. Remember the first game in the SEC Championship game, they looked tired. The up-tempo style of play offensively from Alabama wore the defenders down for Georgia, especially in the trenches. This ball game tonight, we saw fresher guys. We saw legs that seemed to be energized. They were able to continue and up with a nice rotation. But anytime they got guys in the flow of the ball game, they played with a lot of energy. And they just won their one-on-one matchups in the trenches. The first ball game, the offensive lineman from Bama won the matchups. But when you look at this ball game tonight, Jordan Davis, all of the guys in the front with their hand in the dirt, won their matchups. Not to mention when you look at some of the blitz concepts they were able to implement. And oh, by the way, it helps when you're not playing against the top 2 pass catchers from Alabama, because now you're working with younger guys, Bryce Young that is, and the separation and the rhythm clearly wasn't there. And that just allowed more time for the defenders to get back there to put pressure on Bryce Young.
Yeah, Chip, how did that impact Alabama after the first half? Because we saw John Mechie III go out in the SEC title game. We see Jamison Williams go out in the national title game. How did that change the game for Alabama? Because the complexion certainly changed going into the second half.
Massive, massive. And look, I want to give Georgia all the flowers. I didn't want to go right there. But Jaleel Billingsley let down this Alabama offense even before the Jamison Williams injury. He did not have a good game. Agiye Hall got his number called time and time again. A couple of bad drops in this game. Ja'Cory Brooks had some opportunities. Trayshawn Holden was targeted time and time and time again. The next man up in terms of the pass catchers for Alabama just literally dropped the ball. Did not answer the call in a way that I think was potential, in a way that Devonta Smith did, in a way that Jerry Jeudy did when Alabama was able to win the national championship. Najee Harris also was in that game. Not Damian Harris. Najee Harris in overtime was the player that was playing for Alabama. It was Alex Leatherwood, not Jonah Williams. The freshman answered the call in 2017 at the end of that season in a way that some of the young players in this game, given that same opportunity, that those former Alabama players just didn't come up with the plays that they needed to. And look, I assumed that was just going to be a plug-and-play situation. But when the opponent is as strong as Georgia, then it's not going to be that easy. And those contested balls, you've got to be strong with that. And so I do want to make sure that as we are sitting here dissecting this game, the first, second, and third story are Georgia, but the absence of John Mechie, the absence of Jamison Williams, and the inability for those next pass catchers in that lineup to step up to the occasion played a massive factor in the result of this game.
No doubt it did. The final number there, 3 sacks for this Georgia defense, moved the pocket and defensively did what they did throughout the regular season, and not that one outstanding performance, or not so outstanding performance, but outstanding in the sense that it did not fall in line with what they did there in the SEC title game. Hakeem, your thought?
What was interesting is that Jordan Davis came out, guys. He admitted that their conditioning wasn't where it needed to be
in the SEC
for the SEC title game. And BMAC, you alluded to that. You said that they didn't look great in that SEC title game. The pressure wasn't there. The pressure was here in this one. You saw early on in the first quarter they sacked Bryce Young, something they had not done at all during the SEC championship. So clearly a different approach from Dan Lanning, who now is on his way to Oregon. But what a performance by he and his defense in this one.
No question. And remember, outside of that debacle in the SEC championship game, Georgia just dominated every opposing offense they faced. They were one of the best defenses I've seen in college football in a long time. And I went out on record saying that this probably was the best defense that Kirby has had the luxury of coaching throughout his tenure there in Athens. But we didn't see that same style of play. We didn't see the physical nature. We didn't see the energy. But tonight, we saw the energy playing against the Heisman winner in Bryce Young. They made life miserable for him. And even when he was completing passes, it seemed like every time there was someone in his face collapse in the pocket. And remember the difficulties that Bama had in the first half trying to run the football. They were just stout. Georgia's defense was just stout, not just against the pass, but against the rushing attack as well. And eventually, Brian Robinson got some things going in the second half, but it wasn't the usual Brian Robinson that we've seen throughout the course of the year. Yeah, so Stetson Bennett played good football. They ran the football well in the second half. But if you're asking me who paved the way for this big-time win for Georgia, it was their defense. Red zone defense was outstanding tonight for Georgia.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.